Your next crisis, part two. Part one, I think, was excellent. It talked about, complacency, humility, where those come from and where those don't come from, and possible major outcomes from those, plus a few other ideas. Part two, I want to focus on that your next crisis is not going to be the same format as your last crisis. I talked about that a little bit before, but I want to add a little bit to that. That I have a chapter in one of my books, I forget the title, but it's basically saying that, as life is always difficult. The reason is because as you become stronger by facing your challenges and growing and learning things, you take on more responsibility, which are things that you haven't done before. And so it's more difficult. Like the President of the United States has, more responsibility than a cashier at Burger King. Nothing wrong with either job, but they're under more scrutiny, and they have more complex and involved things that they have to do. So your next crisis isn't going to be like your last crisis. Like it's kind of like going up steps of a ladder. Like if you fall from the bottom step, you get hurt, but if you fall from the top step of a really high ladder, you could get seriously hurt or killed. So it's kind of like, as you get more responsibilities and you can cope with more things, you face new challenges because you've never dealt with them before. I mean, one example is sales and sales managers. Great salespeople don't always make the best sales managers. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't know the percentages, but because it's a different skill set. Selling, one-on-one, you have to have good people skills. You have to be, persuasive, empathy, all that. Sales management, you have to actually know not just how to sell, but how to manage people. I should actually say lead people, because leadership is much better than management. And those are two totally different things. Selling the product and leading a person in their job is totally different. I mean, there might be some overlap, but only to a certain degree. So people make that mistake in business. They think, oh, anybody great at sales. It's the same mistake. Just being a great baseball player doesn't mean you're going to be a great baseball coach, because there's different skill sets. Yeah, you can. Part of the reason is sometimes it's actually a disadvantage, because a lot of sales people that are great and baseball players that are great, they're just kind of naturals. I mean, they probably worked hard also like Michael Jordan, but they don't always understand all the struggle and all the nuances of how to do things that they just did naturally, that other people don't do naturally. So they just do it, because they just did it, so they don't understand why the person can't do it when they could do it. So your next crisis is not going to mimic your last crisis, because it's different in kind. Like they say, things can be quantitative or qualitative. If things are just quantitative, then you can kind of burrow your way through it, because you kind of understand that type of problem. And even if you can't solve all of it, you can solve part of it, because you understand what kind of problem it is. But when it's qualitative, then it's this is a different beast. This is a different animal. This is a different kind of problem I've ever seen before. And that makes it much harder.